Okay, we're going to get started. Welcome, everybody. We may have a few join us yet, and that's fine. My name is Bill Dirksen. I'm the former Vice President of Labor Affairs for Ford. I retired about a year and a half ago, thankfully. And today, I think we have a very interesting and frankly, very important topic to discuss with everybody. Obviously, nothing defines the experience we've all had over the last year and a half, like the pandemic. And if you think about that in the context of major manufacturing and the prospect of running manufacturing plants with 1,000 or 2,000 people together working every day under one roof, it's a pretty daunting prospect how you do that under the conditions we've had the last year and a half. So that's what we're going to talk about today, and specifically how the UAW and Ford came together to solve that very complex set of issues that had to be worked through before manufacturing could resume in the auto industry. So that's the topic for today. Just a little bit about how we're going to run it, the session. We've got a presentation. We've got 4 presenters from the UAW and from Ford. I'll introduce them in just a minute. And what we'll do is we'll go through the presentation and we'll give them the chance to do that. Now, if you have questions, and hopefully you do during that presentation, please submit them into the chat function. I think probably that's how most of these sessions are doing it. And then at the end, we'll have plenty of time for questions and answers. I'll go to the chat and read out the questions from there. And hopefully we'll also have some time for some live questions as well. You can unmute yourself at that time and ask some live questions. So let me introduce today's presenters. From the UAW, we have Steve Zimmerla, the Executive Administrative Assistant, UAW National Ford Department, and Brandon Keatts, Administrative Assistant, UAW National Ford Department. These are 2 of the most senior leaders within the UAW for members at Ford. And then for the company, Jenny Torony, HR Director, North America, and Wendy Burkett, the Director of Global Safety Operations for Ford. And collectively, these are the leaders that were really at the center of all the work around what to do with manufacturing during the pandemic and how to restart operations and how to keep everybody safe. And if I could just ask everybody to think back to what life was like in March, April, and May of last year, and what you were thinking about and how you felt. And, it's fair to say it was a period of great uncertainty and great stress. And I think under those circumstances, a lot of union management relationships, frankly, would have broken down. But that's not what happened with the UAW and with Ford. They drew upon their history, they drew upon their relationships to come together to solve a very complex set of issues in a way that kept the company running, got the company back running, and more importantly, kept employees and members safe during that process. So that's what we're going to hear about today. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to the presenters. And Steve, I think you're going to start. Take it away.
Thank you, Bill. And I just want to start by saying that, as you alluded to, it was a very difficult situation at the time, something we never encountered. No one's been through a pandemic like this. And we consider what we did to be successful, even though, again, it was stuff that we never done before. And we could not have been so successful if we did not work together as a team with Ford Motor Company. That's why today we are very happy to be in this discussion with Ford Motor Company, because again, it was definitely a team effort, and it was something that, again, I think we're all very proud of. But today's topics, we're going to talk about joint actions and processes that went into those discussions, and really 2 sections that we're going to talk to are care for our employees, which we'll get into the timeline of events. Then the UAW Ford COVID-19 Leadership Forum, which was really the integral part of getting together, discussing, and having great dialogue of moving forward. Return to work process, and then successful partnerships, and then we'll talk about mental health and the well-being. And then the second section we'll be talking about is the care for our neighbors section, which will pertain to maintaining safe practices in and outside of work, and then community initiatives that we were part of. Next slide. So the timeline really started, as we all know, in January. So January 20th was first reported case in the United States. We didn't quite know what was happening at that point. Just kind of, I really didn't personally think that it was going to affect us too much. And then it kind of started really snowballing, and obviously concern set in for everyone. And then January 30th, the World Health Organization declares the outbreak in the public health emergency of international concern. And then you start getting into February, where the Secretary of Human Health Services testifies U.S. has only a fraction of the medical equipment necessary. So we all start understanding that it's not only a health issue, but it's an issue for the community as well. And then mid-March, and I give great kudos and a lot of admiration for our UAW president, Roy Gamble, who brought the big three together, GM, Ford, and FCA, all the leaders together, and considered a coronavirus task force, and some big discussions. And I think that was the first time, at least I can remember, that the big three got together in that forum, because they are competitors. But this was something that we all knew we needed to put our hands around and really put our heads together on. And then the next day, excuse me, is when the UAW Ford daily joint COVID-19 call started. And I think Brandon would get into that a little bit. And then later on in March, the Ford, GM, and FCA announced plans to suspend production, which was part of those joint talks that we had. And obviously that is a huge deal for any company, especially the automotive industry. And it obviously wasn't taken lightly. And I give great kudos to Ford Motor Company for realizing it had to do that, and it did it. And then we started getting into what we're going to do for the community. March 22nd, the first PAPR hood was sewn. March 24th, 4,000 face shields were delivered that were being built by us to Detroit hospitals. And around also this time is when we started putting our joint messaging to the leadership in the Ford facilities, and also the UAW only joint or UAW only messaging. And then Ford was doing their messaging as well. So a lot of communications going out, trying to keep everyone abreast of what is going on, because there's a lot of uncertainty. Then we get into April. Obviously, face mask production begins. 1 million face shields were produced. We started touring a little of the face mask production sites and the face shields, and a lot of great stuff going on. End of April, 20,000 gallons were produced. Then you get into May. It was decided at that point to return to work manufacturing playbook was published. We knew we were going to go back to work at some point. And a lot of work, I know we'll be discussing that, got into this return to work playbook. A lot of joint sessions, a lot of hours put into that. And then May 11th, 10 million masks were produced. So again, we're continuing to do our due diligence and helping the community with PPE. And then May 18th is when Ford resumes U.S. manufacturing operations with 1 million gallons being produced. So at the same time that we're all struggling and working together to bring manufacturing back to operation, we're continuing to do what we can do to help the community with their PPE production. And before I turn it over to Brandon, I just want to add two more points that, the joint UAW Big Three Task Force continues to meet periodically, even up to today, which has helped move this along. And I just want to add that also all the UAW workforce that helped build the PPE when everyone else was forced to stay home because manufacturing was ceased at that point, they're all volunteers. And we actually had more volunteers than we needed, which was, I think, just, a wonderful mode to the UAW hourly workforce, that they just wanted to help what they can. So with that, I will turn it over to Brandon.
Okay, thanks, Steve, and good afternoon. Steve had mentioned our international UAW president and executive board had met with the big three auto companies, Ford, GM, and FCA, in the early stages of the pandemic, was really to strategize on the alignment of how to care for our employees, as well to maintain consistencies across the companies within the business. From that original meeting, like Steve had mentioned, Ford Motor Company and the UAW established our own COVID-19 task force weekly cadence. along with several other work streams which reported back to the task force. Our UAW Ford meeting cadence consisted of 3 meetings per week, Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays at the height of the pandemic, ultimately resulting in over 115 UAW Ford COVID-19 leadership meetings held during the year of 2020. And as I stated, aside from the COVID-19 task force leadership meetings, there are and were several work streams of teams and efforts that meet separately on topics such as the development and updating of the Ford Return to Work playbook, which, keep in mind, this playbook is the cornerstone of all the rules, processes, and procedures of how to operate our UAW Ford facilities during this pandemic. Separate teams worked on communications to employees, and there were a tremendous amount of communications. Most of them were of joint letters from our UAW and Ford vice presidents, capturing points of what is happening in real time with the virus, what actions our organizations are putting in place to keep people safe, and also pushing out encouraging messages, thanking our employees and members, just as Steve had pointed out, those that had stepped up working in the facilities while many of us were at home. Also, there have been many communications from the Ford safety and medical community whenever there's a change to CDC or World Health Organization rules, updates to Ford's playbook, or just general messages on the COVID vaccine, as we had just recently got into the availability of those. We've had joint UAW and Ford teams working on, we call it the Hero at Home campaigns. These were campaigns delivering messages, posters, and visual aids to promote the importance of practicing safe protocols, even outside of the workplace, and how to be, quote, a hero at home for your family. UAW Ford, we really emphasized the delivery of these campaigns over the past year when holidays were approaching, and we knew there was the potential for employees, their families, and society to gather in large groups. The effort was to do what we can to keep in touch with the employees, to keep driving the severity of the virus, and hopefully reduce exposure. Of course, as Steve had mentioned, the effort Ford Motor Company took on, which was called Project Apollo. This was a significant topic that we had to stay intricately involved with, pushing out communications from the very top of our organizations to the employees and ground zero working in the facilities, expressing our gratitude for volunteers, explaining the details of what to expect, the duration Ford Motor Company would be producing ventilators, respirators, face masks, and more. And lastly, our team spent a tremendous amount of time aligning and developing messages to our members, employees who were at home during the shutdown of the pandemic, not knowing really what was going on, not knowing all the efforts, not knowing all the conversations. These messages explained what to expect when returning to work, such as the thermal temperature scans that would be put into place, the daily self-certification, where we have to identify if we had any exposure or any symptoms to COVID-19. These messages explained workstation changes within the plant, talking about the different barriers that might be put in place, how we did things to maintain social distancing, and most importantly, the expectation of wearing a Ford-provided face mask in the workplace. So with that, I will pause and pass it over to Wendy.
All right, thank you. Next slide, please. Thank you, Brandon. What I'd like to do is take a few minutes to discuss factors that Ford took under consideration when we determined as the title of the slide says, caring for our employees and really our community. But in the middle of this pandemic, it certainly was even more so. As you can see, and what we've laid out here were many considerations that we took into account before we could make any decisions on our operations. We worked really close with the respective government agencies. We always made sure we were at least as stringent as any national, state, or local regulations, as well as cooperating with all the lockdown rules. Along the bottom of the slide, you can see a number of additional determinants, including our benchmarking initiatives, all of our joint work that we did with our unions, and the health and readiness of our suppliers and the dealer demand for our products. So keeping all of these priorities in front of us, that's when we really began the important work of how we were going to restart our company. Next slide, please. Thank you. Between the months of March and May of 2020, as we've been alluding to, even though those months went by extremely fast, we were extremely busy. All of our operations were shut down almost globally. And that's really where we began to assemble the framework for our COVID-19 business resumption plan, which we call our return to work playbook. The playbook, which is still guides us today, we're still using it even today, it provided the protocols that would safely allow our employees to return to our manufacturing plants, our testing facilities, and our parts depots. The playbook became our communications tool to educate our employees, as Brandon said, on such things as what do we do to make our facilities safe for our employees to come back to work. That included additional cleaning for both the common areas as well as the workstations. It included the installation of physical barriers, social distancing requirements, at the workstation, in team rooms, and in break areas, and even in offices. In addition, we added COVID-specific signage throughout the facilities to give our employees reminders of new protocols or work rules to keep everyone safe while we could run our operations. The playbook also detailed what would happen when employees came back to work, including the requirement of completing the daily health survey, as Brandon mentioned, a temperature scan as you entered the building, and a face mask requirement, and even in some cases, a face shield as additional required personal protective equipment. Our facility readiness actions included keeping common areas such as cafeterias and fitness centers closed, and that was to help reduce the risk of the virus transmission. We looked at enhancing our ventilation and our air exchanges, and so that was all reviewed. And we put together a best-in-class care team process that was assembled to individually review, evaluate, and disposition a confirmed positive case to assure that we had mitigated all the risks to our employees. I'm happy to be the one to say that none of our employees have become symptomatic or tested positive when following our safety protocols. This is a really bold statement, and it's a big one. It's a big deal to us and a real pride point even today, and a testament to the playbook and our diligence in keeping our employees safe. The playbook was communicated to all of our employees globally, just so you understand the depth and breadth of how we use this. It was also shared widely with government agencies and state agencies. We also shared it with our suppliers and our dealers. And again, as I said, it's still in use today internally and remains a public document so that we can share our best practices. And now I'd like to turn it back over to Brandon. Thank you.
Thanks, Wendy. And as you've heard through the presentation so far, UAW and Ford Motor Company is proud of our successful partnership, not only the one we've traditionally had, but also the partnership we've displayed during this pandemic. On the very topics we've already touched on, like collaboration of the return to work protocols, employee communications and videos, and away from work initiatives. But with that said, over the past year, our organizations had to face and hold many hard conversations, some of which originally resulted in a disagreement. However, like always, UAW Ford hears each other out, and we find a resolution that both parties can live with. One of those hard conversations I can personally speak to, which was the expanded utilization of temporary employees. From a UAW viewpoint, the utilization of temporary employees is a historical topic that goes against the UAW grain of what we want for our members. However, early in the pandemic, back in 2020, the UAW recognized the uncertainty that faced us all and the importance to work with Ford Motor Company to have the manpower and enough manpower to support their operations. So we agreed over the past year to allow exceptions to the collective bargaining agreement on the number of temporary employees the company can utilize. This agreement alone has supported the company to have a flexible and sufficient number of employees to run their operations, while also making sure that any number of employees who may have been infected or exposed to COVID-19 remained at home and did not report to work. So while I recognize the agreement we made in return. Ford Motor Company has gone out of the way to make sure that they continue to protect and provide the negotiated health care to those employees who were absent from work during the height of the shutdown last year, who were absent due to exposure of the virus, and who are absent from work under the terms defined by the CARES Act put in place by our government. So I'll just close this slide by saying, where there's a will, there's a way. Ford Motor Company, UAW, has and will continue to have our fair share of open debates. But like I've already stated, we always find a way to reach the agreements that benefit us both. And most importantly, to do what we have to do to keep our employees and members safe, which again, ultimately achieving our successful partnership. Next slide.
All right, as Brandon mentioned, we jointly developed employee communication materials, and the UAW Ford team has always recognized the importance of regular communication directly to employees. And with this in mind, during the pandemic, we developed a lot of information for employees, not only to provide updates, answer questions, and make sure they were aware of resources, but also anytime we were considering making a change or they had additional questions, we made sure to explain the why behind the communication. To help drive awareness of these efforts and recognize the importance that our employees play not only at work, but also in their communities, we named the campaign Hero at Home. This slide shows an example of one of the joint letters. It was one of many we did during the pandemic and continue to do that highlighted some of the resources available for employees. You'll notice that many of the resources are focused on well-being. It's really important for us as a team to ensure employees are getting the help they need. And so each joint letter always reinforced the resources available. And then we made sure at our plant locations that they were advertised and available to all employees 24/7. A few examples of the well-being resources include around-the-clock counseling services if an employee or one of their family members needs someone to talk to, and assistance for parents such as tutoring or daycare, which became even more important during the pandemic. Next slide, please. As I mentioned, our campaign, which was jointly developed and we're really proud of, was created to help recognize our employees and the huge impact they were having. As most of you know, our employees were coming back to work when many others were still at home. And so it was important for us not only to recognize them as heroes for that, but also the influence they had on their families and community. The campaign provided tools for employees to talk to their kids about COVID-19, including one of the things we're most proud of is a family pledge to help them talk to their children about staying safe during the pandemic. The joint team also provided regular reminders in every facility, as Brandon mentioned, before any major holiday or event that was going on in the community. We put up reminders in all the plants to help our employees remember to drive safe behaviors outside of work. Our employees did such a great job of following our protocols in our facilities. We saw them as important ambassadors to help continue those safe practices outside of work too. With that, I'll turn it back to Wendy.
All right, thank you. Steve and Brandon both gave some highlights to Project Apollo, and this slide is kind of a summary of all of that great work. This certainly was extraordinary work as it related to COVID, and really is about our company shifting production from automotive to PPE during the pandemic. We quickly realized early on that there was a shortage of necessary PPE, especially for our healthcare workers and first responders, and that we at Ford needed to be the good community partners that we've always been, and shifted the operations of many of our manufacturing plants into making such items as we show here, which are face masks, face shields, which we still make today, by the way, but also the power air purifying respirators, ventilators, isolation gowns, and the easy to assemble and set up air cleaners. This team and this initiative, as we mentioned, is called Project Apollo. And back in the beginning, it was in partnership with FEMA. And again, we continue this work today. And we're very proud to say that we've exceeded 125 million donated face masks, especially in communities that had limited access to PPE. And we have over 54 million face masks for our employees and dealers. All of the PPE items shown were donated widely across the country and around the world. Again, to help our communities, our hospitals, our first responders, as well as our employees and their families. Next slide, please. All right, and as we end the presentation, we're going to show you a short video. And as we get ready to queue up the video, it's my privilege to say, on behalf of this team and the UAW and Ford Motor Company, thank you very much for your time today. We're really, really proud of this work and highlighting this, and happy to show all of our efforts, and we appreciate you letting us tell our story. So thank you.
Project Apollo was formed after listening to a medical professional identify an incredible need for personal protection equipment.
It's incredible that a company of that size was willing to pivot and flex the supply chain.
Our plants were down. What's also unique is we have all this equipment in an automotive vehicle. So this really is about that type of scrappiness. We got to use what we got.
There is no greater pressure because you're building a piece of equipment that's going to save somebody's life.
We didn't have a lot of time to make this stuff. And the amazing part was people from the UAW who raised their hand and volunteered.
Nobody said no. Nobody said why. Everybody just said, let's go.
I didn't have to volunteer, but I felt that it was for the greater good.
If I could do something positive, I wanted to do that. If everybody said, well, I'm not going to do it, none of this will get built.
Vehicle programs take years to develop. This got put in and running in 3 weeks. I've never seen anything like it.
To get an email from a nurse or a doctor, it gave you goosebumps to know that that person got something that you produced.
You know, I never served the military, and this was an opportunity for me to say, hey, I can do something for the country and for Americans.
The UAW members stepped up. I'm just so grateful to be a part of this. This is history right here.
Okay, thank you very much to all four of our presenters. I want to again invite people to submit questions they have in the chat. I've got a couple to ask already. Came in privately. Let me start with the first one to get us going here. And that question is, in a union management relationship, how do you lay the groundwork ahead of time so that when kind of unexpected, dramatic things happen, like what happened to you last year, that you've already been set up to be able to deal with it rather than be paralyzed by it? It doesn't just happen. You've got to somehow have the groundwork laid to be in position to do what you need to do and what you did last year. So can you talk a little bit about that?
I can start off. So I'll say from the UAW standpoint, and Bill, you and I worked a lot together over the years, and without us knowing that we were, I think, making the groundwork, we were doing it for years. And Ford and the UAW has always had a good working relationship for many years. Now, again, do we get along? I mean, do we agree on everything? Absolutely not. And that's what I think makes us move forward in a positive way. But again, when it's all said and done, if there's a task at hand, we've always been able to do that. And I think what helped us during the pandemic was really not too long before then, we just got out of negotiations. So negotiations just isn't a couple week or even a couple month long process either. That is really, I know Jane and I working a year and a half prior even to negotiations. And then on top of it, you've got your day-to-day issues that pop up. And again, I think because of the relationship that was formed many years prior to even us, of Ford working with the UAW and vice versa, I think the groundwork was laid, and it sure did make a lot easier process moving forward in a pandemic that none of us expected. And obviously, I'm not going to call out any other companies, but I did hear some stories where some companies and union were the relations was not the best, with negotiations and different, just in general, and they had a little tougher time during the pandemic. So we were very thankful, and I know every time we talk to the company that the groundwork, I think, was laid out, and I guess saying all that to say this is it's good to move forward and try to work together every day, because you don't know when something like a pandemic is going to happen that's a lot bigger than all of us, that we are going to have to come together and work through.
Yeah, this is Jenny, and I'll just echo what Steve said. The laying the groundwork ahead of time is so important in building that relationship. The only thing I would add, and I think it makes the UAW Ford team really strong, is we always try to understand each other's points of view. And I think taking the time to understand where each group is coming from really helped during this pandemic, because it helped us provide the right level of communication to employees, and it helped us develop the playbook. The other thing I would say that we've always been really good at is we're okay talking about where we don't disagree with each other. And again, bringing those issues out on the table and talking through them. And that might take a few days to work them through, or Steve said, if when you're in negotiations, might take longer. But that is one of the things I think has always made us a really strong team.
Okay, thank you. I've got a couple other questions here. Let me go to this one next. This question is, we all faced a reality of politics being injected into the pandemic response. Did Ford and UAW face any related political issues? If so, how did you navigate the issue?
That's a good question, Bill. From the UAW standpoint, yeah, we seen right away, and still to this day, everything was politicized. We knew that we had a lot of members that viewed things one way, and others viewed it a different way. I would just say, and Brandon, you want to add to this, in talking to our bosses and the leadership of UAW, is we just try to stay above that, because it's easy to get in the fray, right? And get your own personal thoughts involved in the decisions. And I think we all did a very good job of trying to stay away from that and just look at the task at hand. And I will tell you that speaking, and I think the Ford can say that as well, and speaking about Ford members that I was involved in these discussions with, I don't know their political affiliation, how they voted. And I think that was a good thing, right? Because we just looked at the task at hand, and you couldn't tell any individual entity going a certain direction because of what cable news said in a certain way, or any direction they wanted us to go. So I think we were very successful in doing that, and I think just staying above it all sure did help.
Yeah, and I'll just add to what Steve had said, just to give a clear example, is face masks. Face masks have been something that has been politicized from the very from the very jump of this pandemic to today, with changes to CDC rules. Ford Motor Company and the UAW still to today are mandating that masks continue to be worn within our Ford facilities. Not to say that that won't change here in the near future, but before we just make a knee-jerk reaction and peel back that layer of protocol, we're talking and having conversations about trying to gauge, maybe what is a significant part of our workforce that has been vaccinated, which has not been, trying to make sure we still understand the other protocols we still have put into place to make sure we're providing the best effort of safety for that workforce. So again, to Steve's point, is just there's politics in there, there's politics out there, and we're trying to stay above it and work together as a team to maintain consistency and do what the right thing is to do. But face masks, again, has been perfect example of the politics right from the jump. Even as far as what type of face mask should we wear? You know, there's a lot of heat and pressure about should it be, you know, just a regular standard surgical face mask? Should it be N95 face mask? Can people wear their own type of bandanas? And UAW Ford right off the rip had a line that said, you know what, let's just be consistent. Let's do what's the best for our membership and what provides the best protection. So again, just staying above it, as Steve had pointed out.
And I guess I would be happy to add, one thing we did as far as the politics is really look ahead with the government and the various agencies. We did a lot of work. We gave a lot of presentations to the state governor's offices. We worked very closely with them. We spent an inordinate amount of time sharing our protocols and our playbook so that the state governor's offices understood how ready we were to restart once we realized we were ready to restart. So we really got ahead of it. It paid dividends for us. It continues to pay dividends for us today. We consider the local government offices our partners, if you will. They still come in and spot check us. We have a really good track record as far as that goes. They're still very busy visiting our facilities, and we have a really good record to show that. We continue to share the protocols with them and where we were at. So it's it was a proactive approach from the get-go. We wanted them to know what we were doing. We wanted them to see how involved we were in the process and how ready we were going to be.
All right, very good. Thank you. I think we have a question from Javier. If you want to go ahead and unmute.
Yeah, hi, Bill. Thanks. First of all, I just want to say how impressive that it is what UAW and Ford did here. It's just amazing, and thank you for all the great work that you all did and for being the leaders. The question I have is that I know that UAW Ford has had a tremendous collaborative relationship for years and been able to take advantage of that relationship for mutual gain. And the question I have is, what challenges though do you have? I know it can't be all rosy, right? So what are some of the challenges that you all experience in this collaborative relationship? And what opportunities might there be for some, like Steve had mentioned, where folks have not had a good relationship and they really struggled through this COVID-19 because of the not having that relationship ahead of time? Are there ways that they could use this to maybe get a little bit more on board and collaborate more effectively?
Thanks, Javier. So I think one of the questions was, what are some challenges we're having now? I think, right?
Just in general, in your collaborative relationship.
Yeah. Well, so overall, yeah, we've always been able to work through any difficult situation, all the way from, as far as I can look back in my career, 08, 09, when the whole industry was going in the tank, and all the way through then, and 9/11, and then obviously the pandemic, and now what we're working through is really transformative time for the auto industry of going to electrification, and that's a really big deal moving forward. So I think that's a big challenge that we are going to have working together, but no doubt we can work through it, is because obviously UAW looks at things a little differently, as in possibly a company does, and the wages maybe and if we build batteries, and so we're concerned about if it goes electrification, what does that do to transmission plants and engine plants? So there's a lot of dialogue already starting, and I know it's going to get really heated up in coming negotiations. And actually, I'm really looking forward to it. But it is going to be a big challenge because it's something that's new. But because of, I think that we can look back, go into our tool chest of how we worked through different things in the past. That's how I feel very confident, and the UAW leadership feels very confident that we can work through it. We are going to agree on everything? Absolutely not. But we're gonna make sure we do what's best for the membership, but at the same time, Ford has to be successful as well. So again, some challenging situations coming up in the future, really for the next decade and so on. But I do believe, because of what we've been through, our history of all the tough decisions that's being made, and plant closures being made, and what we do with you know, the membership and moving forward to the proper place it needs to be, I think we have it in our back pocket and we'll be successful to move forward. Hopefully that answers your questions.
Yeah, and this is Jenny. I'll just add a couple of things. I think one of the things that's sort of a ongoing tension always is where one group wants to move fast and one group wants to take a little more time. And at any given issue, that might be the UAW or that might be Ford. And I'll give you a personal example from the pandemic. Brandon, hopefully you don't mind me using this one. But Brandon and I spent a lot of time talking through sort of this tension between going fast, but moving at the right pace to make sure all employees really understand the change. And during the pandemic, there were several times where we reviewed our cleaning protocols, and that was based on updated CDC guidance and also health department guidance. And you know, although it seems like a simple thing that we could just make that change quickly, making sure that from the top of the organization all the way down to the plant floor that employees understood why, I believe made us more successful and allowed the plants to focus on keeping employees safe versus debating the issue. And so I would say that's a big lesson learned over time. The other thing I would say is just from a labor perspective and community perspective, we really have a responsibility to teach the newer folks coming into labor what works well with the UAW management relationship. And so for me, you know, that's talking about lessons learned, that's making sure they have experience working with the UAW and can understand how to make that a positive working relationship.
Okay, thank you. I've got another question for the group. And Brandon, you touched on this one a little bit earlier, but there's probably more to say. How are the UAW and Ford working together to consider changing the protocols as federal, state, county, and city agencies continue to roll back restrictions?
Okay, yeah, I'll try to kick this off with that answer. It's getting difficult. You know, there's changes that are happening so fast within, you know, different states, within different agencies, within different organizations. And as I had alluded to, you know, UAW Ford, we're trying to not add to that confusion. And that's, I think, what we initially right off the rip can agree to as UAW Ford is to say, okay, you know, we're responsible for all of our, let's say, I'll say 57,000 hourly members across the country, here in Michigan, here in Ohio, here in Missouri, and everywhere else there's a Ford facility. And there might be one rule that applies here in Michigan, but that does not apply to Missouri. And we agreed right off the rip that we cannot create the confusion for the workers in the plant. So what do we have to do to try to maintain consistency, stay together on the messaging, and have those conversations like I had alluded to about the face mask? You know, when should we pull that back? We need data. I think we're all aligned that we're all agreeing, that, you know, we would like to see a little bit of data before we just make a decision just to comply everywhere else. You know, Ford has not mandated, you know, the vaccine within the company, so we don't necessarily know that true audience. So again, I think what helps is, yeah, there's pressures, but agreeing that we see what happens in society with some of these changes, that there's confusion, us aligning right off the rip to say we don't want to add to that confusion, and then just to have that open conversation, open dialogue, like everybody has already mentioned, to say, you know, what are the UAW's concerns? How do we not hold the change up that the company wants to make for too long? But also, you know, us hearing what the company's concerns are as well too. Hopefully that answered it a little bit.
And Brandon, I'm happy to add to that. And honestly, everything that Brandon just said is exactly true. Right now, a state of change. States are changing the guidelines. The regulatory agencies are now starting to weigh in. CDC has made a recent guideline change with regards to face masks for fully vaccinated employees. So we're really taking a mindful approach on how we're going to handle this. As Brandon said, we have not mandated vaccines, so we're not sure. We're using community data to establish the percentage of our employees that we believe would be vaccinated. And we've been really mindful and even a bit, I would say, conservative, which is okay, on our approach to how we want to make the next move. You know, I look at it as a circle. We've come about this far, and now we're down to here, and I feel like we're getting ready to start bringing it home, if you will. But we don't want to do it any faster or, before we're ready, being both sides. And we're really going to be conservative and slow about how we handle this. We think we're in a good place. The conversations are going to continue as they always have. The UAW is going to keep being our good work partners, especially as it relates to communications, so that our employees are hearing the joint message. But there's no doubt about it. We are in a state of flux right now. We're getting ready to pivot, and we're making really good decisions about how and when we might pivot these protocols and try to do it at the right time. So critical juncture right now, I would say. But we're going to get there. We've made it this far, and we are going to get there the rest of the way. We have full confidence.
All right. Thank you, Wendy and Brandon, on that question. Another one that's just come in. Thank you for what you did together, and thank you for sharing this story. Do you plan to publish this pandemic-related effort as a case study?
I will say from the UAW, we have not talked to that. Maybe Ford has, but as a UAW, yes, we're very proud of what we did, but we haven't got that far in those discussions.
Yeah, I think that's probably a fair answer, Bill. I think because we're still in the middle of it, perhaps we aren't thinking that far along yet. There might be a point in time where we do make that a consideration, and that's something we can certainly talk about. But quite honestly, we are still in the middle of it, in a lot of day-to-day considerations and decisions that still need to be made. And I think we feel that's our priority at this time.
Okay, very good. Any other live questions that anybody wanted to ask as we get towards the end of the session?
Hey, Bill, it's Javier again. I know a group that might be able to help you put that paper together. There's a lot of great folks in Lyra that would love to help put a paper like that together. And you know, that's an interesting question though, because what I'm hearing, you really are the true leaders in this. And I saw the comment from Kevin in there about getting all three industries, all three companies together to have a common approach. And it's just baffling to me why more industries aren't doing that. And I think maybe having some type of guidance from your experiences would be very helpful to other industries. And I could think like two of them that pop up right at the top of my head is like the grocery industry or even the meat packing industry, where having a common approach would be extremely helpful.
Yeah, I think that's a really good comment. And I think the team will take that on board. And as Steve said earlier, I mean, it really, a lot of credit to the three companies, but really, you know, Rory, Gamble, and the UAW are the ones who kind of created the spark, you know, for that all to happen as they worked across the three companies to create this cross-industry effort on something of shared concern for the companies, their employees, and their communities. So I do think it's a great example. Yeah. Is there any final comments that any of the presenters would like to make before we close?
I'll add one thing, and it kind of it adds on to the question about the case study. We do continue to do a lot of benchmarking and a lot of discussions, at least certainly from the safety as well as the medical standpoint. We're very heavily involved with automotive and non-automotive in the safety director forum that I'm a part of, and that our corporate medical team is a part of as well, where we can talk and discuss items across the industries. So while maybe a formal publication of a case study has not been done yet, we certainly do in various forums talk and communicate amongst ourselves across the industries to make sure that we're sharing best practices, and that we're also in line with other companies and businesses as we take these next steps forward.
Thank you, Wendy. And for the UAW, to answer your question, Bill, I'd just like to state that, it was a pleasure for us as UAW to be involved in this discussion. And for everyone that is out there listening, we are very proud of what we're able to do together. And again, these are just a few of the folks, it's just as Brand and I are just a few of the UAW side that work. There's a huge amount of people that work together on this. And it started, again, as Bill just said, to the UAW president, bringing it all together. And it was definitely a collaborative effort. And it's been my pleasure to be here today and speak with my counterparts on this really successful story, I think. And it really is going to help us moving forward in the difficult decisions, difficult days coming forward. So thank you.
Okay. I want to thank everybody who joined today. I want to thank all the presenters on Sunday. I really appreciate you taking some time out of your day off. Maybe it was your day off, not sure, to do this, and thank everybody who joined. So I think we're going to end it there, and hope everybody has a good day.
Thank you.
Thank you.